Just as Wendy set foot in the shady, vaguely threatening undergrowth, there came a distant tinkling sound. The bauble of golden light tore back through the sky and stopped suddenly in front of her like a confused meteor. It hovered up and down angrily. Within the glow, the fairy tapped her foot and pointed to the sky. "I can't fly," Wendy said politely. "I'll have to meet you there. It will take me longer than I should expect." The fairy looked like she was going to explode in frustration. Her face turned red, and her tiny hands became grasping, straining claws. Her shoulders rolled up around her neck. Sorry?" With a strangled cry, the fairy flew at her. Wendy threw her hands up at her face for protection. Nothing happened. When no pinches or bites occurred, she hesitantly lowered her arms. The fairy was flying in loops and swirls around her, shedding fairy dust as she went, throwing it at Wendy. Delighted, the human girl raised her arms up to fully experience what was happening. Delicate golden sparkles floated and kissed her skin. When they touched, Wendy felt lighter. Tiny pains she hadn't even realized she felt entirely disappeared, and any weariness vanishes. She felt rested, energetic, eager, and airy. "Oh, fairy dust, will this help me fly?" The fairy crossed her arms and nodded. She looked over at Wendy with an appraising eye, perhaps seeing if she had done a good job. Then she nodded again, satisfied, and buzzed off into the sky. Wendy raised her arms. She felt like the wind itself. Nothing happened. "All right," she said. "Here I go." Did the end of her hair lift a little, or was that just breeze? Sparkles continued to twinkle on her arms for a bit before settling into her skin. She worried. Was there a time limit? Did the magic fade if not used properly? And without worry, she felt the earth solidly under her heels again, her full weight bearing down on the soil. Oh, she said, panicking. "Don't do that. Don't think bad thoughts. I don't think the fairy dust likes that. It won't work if I think bad thoughts." Just then, she had to stop herself from worrying about not flying because of worrying and bad thoughts. It made her head less crazy. The fairy hovered a good feet 20 up with her arms crossed with impatient, bored look on her face. "Sorry," Wendy called as brightly as she could. "Never done this before. Doing my best here." The fairy rolled her eyes. Wendy winced. Nothing she did or said seemed to endear her to the pretty little thing at all. She wished she could do something right, immediately, the first time. The fairy drove down and grabbed Wendy's left thumb with both hands and pulled. Wendy caught her breath, delighted by the tiny, warm touch. Luna barked. She didn't like at all the unfriendly creature coming too close to her mistress. Wendy was torn, not wanting to upset the fairy, but not wanting to upset her wolf either. "Oh, it's all right," Wendy said, putting the other hand out for Luna. "She's just trying to help." The wolf pushed her nose into Wendy's palm, licking it and forcing the hand up over her head to encourage scratching behind her ears. Wendy felt a rush of warm affection for this friend she already knew from dreams, who loved her so fiercely and unconditionally. She felt herself lighten. The fairy also must have felt it somehow, because at the exact same moment she tugged, beating her wings, trying to fly backward and drag the girl up. Wendy rose to her toes. Luna barked again, less worried and more perplexed. "Oh, it's working!" Wendy cried. In all that moment, all of Neverland became everything she had always imagined it would be. She could do anything. The sky was blue, the furniture full of infinite good. The fairy still held her hand, obviously trying to keep a skeptical, annoyed look on her face, but her lips moved in a strange but duck-billed twist, as if she was working very hard to keep them from frowning. Her whole face had lightened, the scowling darkness removed like a storm whisked away by a whimsical and beneficent god. When she impatiently rolled her eyes and twirled her fingers, it wasn't anger with this time, it was encouraging. Come on, more of that." "But more of what?" Wendy asked, distracted by the feeling of weightlessness, Luna, and her own thoughts. The fairy tapped her head and then pointed at the human girl and shrugged dramatically. What was I Thinking. Is that what you... Yes, it was. Well, I was thinking about flying. No, I was thinking about Luna, actually. What a girl she is. How wonderful it is that she loves me. Wendy's toes left the ground entirely. Oh, it's happy thoughts. I see it now. They make you fly, she cried, clapping her hands. And with that, she slipped with swirly mounds of earth and rose slowly, twirling into the sky. The fairy kept one tiny hand on her, studying her ascent. Trees and bushes below her waved in the mild tropical breeze like undersea plants. Wendy wasn't as terrified of the height as she thought she might be. The change in perspective was a little thrilling, a little startling. That was all. It was like she merely had nothing to do with the ground anymore. Luna barked. Oh, Luna, I'm all right. The fairy let go. Wendy suddenly listed to the left. It was as if the fairy were the only thing anchoring her to the sky. She thrashed wildly, making flailing, swimming notions that did little to help. The earth rolled, sickening below, looming close. The fairy immediately grabbed her again. Wendy felt everything stabilize. The lightness on both sides of her evened out, and she bobbed steadily again, feeling somehow supported by the air around her. The fairy waited for a moment to give her a look. Are you all right? Are you ready? Wendy swallowed and nodded. The fairy slowly withdrew her tiny hand, drawing it across Wendy's skin until just a finger touched and then nothing at all. Wendy remained steady this time. She laughed, out loud. She hadn't laughed in years, honest, billowing peals of pure joy. Her skirt switched and spread out. Gravity had no effect on her. Nothing at her shoulders, feet, neck, mind, and ears. She was weightless, untouchable. Luna barked. But it was a bark of excitement this time. Oh, wow, look at us, and you and me, and that's all great. Yes, bark. Seeing this, the fairy dipped down and started to sprinkle some dust on her, but the wolf ducked neatly out of the way. She pranced back and forth, her back bending and shimmering in the sunlight. She barked again politely. No, thank you, she was always saying. I'll go my own way. The fairy shook her head. Who wouldn't want to fly, silly thing? And then buzzed up to Wendy's nose and snapped her fingers imperiously. All right, yes, Wendy said, too happy to take offense. I'm coming, forgive me, I've only flown in my dreams before. The fairy rolled her eyes and took off toward the gray mountains, more slowly this time. And Wendy, spreading her arms out to catch the wind, happily followed. And that's the end of that chapter.